We live in a world of instant gratification, where if we want an answer to a question, we can know with a few clicks on our phone. We don't even need to go to the computer anymore. Or if we want to buy something, we can get it shipped to us, even with the option of overnight, getting things very quickly. We also live in a world that highly values comfort and convenience. And also a world that we tend to very much value the self, or highly emphasize our individuality. And with that, an emphasis on our own self-reliance. But these things aren't always good for us. Instant gratification. I can get whatever I want, or whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, as soon as I want it. But sometimes there can be this attitude lurking behind our sin of exactly that. I want what I want, and I want it right now. I'll do whatever it takes to get what I want. And that sometimes, while comfort and convenience aren't bad in and of themselves, sometimes they can easily become sort of idols in our life. Things that we value so much to the expense of holier things or the things of God. I know I really like comfort and convenience. I'm prone to them. And there's definitely moments when I prefer my comfortable and convenient things over other things that perhaps are better. But unfortunately, Jesus did not highly value comfort and convenience. Those are not gospel values. Because Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. He did not say, take up your pillow and your Snuggie and come follow me. He said, take up your cross and follow me. And not if you suffer, but when you suffer. And that it can be tempting to perhaps not do what is truly right and good because of our temptations towards comfort and convenience being the orienting things in our life. And then the emphasis on the self can lead towards selfishness, can lead towards pride, and to forget to be grateful for things. So this holy season of Lent is kind of a time of spiritual renewal. We especially emphasize prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. All things that we should be doing on some level throughout the year. But that especially in this season, we particularly emphasize, more than in other parts of the year, the fasting. In fact, there's some Eastern Christians who refer to Lent as the Great Fast, because it's entering into that desert with Jesus. The idea of this holy season is to push back on our selfishness, our false idols of comfort and convenience. Even to push back on the negative side of instant gratification. Part of the idea of fasting, whether the classical literal definition of fasting, of eating less on certain days that we fast, or fasting from other things that we give up for Lent. Sweets, chocolate, coffee, sugar and coffee, whatever it is. Green beans, It's a joke, by the way. I don't know. I jokingly told someone I was giving up green beans for Lent because, I don't like green beans, so that's why it's funny. All right. But we give up things for Lent, first of all, to help us to be more holy, to be sanctified. And we can unite that in our prayer, asking God, help me to be holier, more patient, more loving towards others. That I do these acts of self-denial, and I unite that with my prayers to exactly that. Deny myself, so that less and less do I become focused on just the things for me and what I want, but growing in virtue, minimizing vice. I can be more disposed to that which is good. I can unite that to prayer. So asking my prayer for my own holiness. Secondly, we also, in the beautiful mystery of our faith, Our self-denials, the little sacrifices we make, can also be united to the cross of Jesus Christ, and therefore offered as prayer for others. That, Lord, I offer this sacrifice, this fasting, whether it's food today, whether it's I'm fasting from these sweets today, any desserts today, and I offer that little suffering, that little act of self-denial, united with your cross, in prayer for others. That the power of your cross through this sacrifice may be extended into the life of this person. So-and-so, my family member or friend, maybe who's struggling, someone I know who's sick, maybe people throughout the world, like such as people suffering in the Ukraine, etc. There's also a third kind of prayer that our fasting can be united to. And that is the prayer of praise and thanksgiving to God. I think the first two sort of make sense, but thinking about offering my sacrifice, my fasting as praise, thanksgiving to God. I don't know about you, but I know sometimes when I try not to eat, say, pie for Lent, and then there it is staring at me, a pie someone offers me, and I deny myself it, my first reaction is not to turn and thank God for this sacrifice. I usually grumble about not being able to eat that pie that I really want to eat, and then think of, is there an excuse I could come up with that could justify me eating this now? And so on. And that's usually how my heart and mind move. But in our first reading today, in Deuteronomy, we hear about the law of the people of Israel offering the first fruits of their harvest. That when they bring in the harvest, the first thing they are to do is not to make their own bread and have a feast to celebrate the fruits of this work. The first thing they are to do, with the very first things they bring in, is to go and offer that to God. Because it's an act for the people to recognize that everything they have and are is sheer gift from God. Sheer, total, undeserved gift from God. My life, my very existence, and all the things that sustain that existence are but sheer gift of God. The people of Israel, it's remembering that it's God who had rescued them from slavery, God who sustained them in the desert, God who continues to bless them. But the people of Israel to recognize that they do not live on bread alone, but from God himself, and every word that comes from the mouth of God. And living in the world of instant gratification, of comfort and convenience, and also the emphasis on our self-reliance. I think one of the great errors of our time, or the temptations that we as human beings can fall into, is this whole idea that we are self-made people. It can make us forget that we are dependent on others. When we're enjoying food that we can get instantly, when I can get something from the drive-thru of McDonald's, I don't think of all the people that was dependent on to make that happen. That our errors to think about of ourselves and all our ingenuity in all the things we create and all the advances in science, etc. To think that we human beings have created ourselves, that we don't need to thank God or turn to him, because we can do this ourselves. There's a very ancient story in the Bible that has wisdom I think is very relevant today. The story of the Tower of Babel, where humanity did just that. They said, let us build a tower. We don't need God. We're self-made people. We can build this tower, in fact, all the way to heaven, and we can rule ourselves. So part of the season of Lent, as a time of renewal, pushes back on all of that. Not only our instant gratification, comfort, and convenience, but this idea of the selfishness or self-reliance. To recognize how dependent we are. Not just on others, though certainly we are, We're sort of strange among all of the other animals in the world for various reasons, but one of them being that human beings are dependent for the longest amount of time after their birth. That most other animals, once they're born, after a few weeks or a few months or 1 year, they're ready to go out on their own. But we have 18 years that we are dependent on others, even before we're considered adults. But even then, our lives always depend on others. But even more than that, how our lives depend on God. Everything I have and am is sheer gift. And part of fasting, denying ourselves even these good things, is sort of offering them like those first fruits with the people of Israel. To recognize this thing that I easily take for granted. This thing I just mindlessly indulge and perhaps don't give adequate thanks for. This thing that now I offer to God, recognizing that everything I have and am, even this thing that I'm denying myself right now, to recognize that the only reason I have it is a gift of God. And so in that, humble ourselves, to ever more fully live with that humble gratitude, to realize my life is not my own, that my life is sheer gift, and I owe it to give thanks. It's also part of the reason we come back here to church week after week. Because if for no other reason, we owe it to God to give thanks for everything I have and am. And in a formal way to do that. And to offer up everything in my life. So as we enter into this time of the great fast of Lent, the season of fasting, of self-denial, we recognize the ways that we can unite that to our prayer for our own holiness and sanctification, as prayer for others, but also as praise and thanksgiving to God. Because man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. Amen.